This short video is one of a series of clips showing you how to use our E-valu-it Toolkit. This video will focus on how to complete the Evaluating Your Intervention section of the E-valu-it Toolkit questionnaire using a road safety example. The example I will be using is a rural young drivers and passengers presentation that ROSPA deliver to young drivers. As you can see, when we open this section of the toolkit, the questions sit within a hub of information. You have this video clip and a useful links section with pages that will help you to gather the information required to answer the questions. There is also a case study below, which will give you an idea of some of the kinds of information you can include in your answers to the questions in this section. For flexibility, all but one of the questions in this section are non-mandatory, so you will only need to answer the ones you feel will be helpful to you in evaluating your intervention. You will need to answer the first question in this section, because this will determine the questions that the toolkit will ask you. Before answering the first question in this section, you will need to carefully read the information in the box to decide how you will measure progress towards your aims. You can then click to show the question. If you have already delivered your intervention, it is worth being aware that collecting information for monitoring and short-term outcomes could be quite difficult, dependent on how long ago you delivered your intervention. However, there are ways that it could be possible. For example, you could look back at how many schools you delivered your workshop at as a form of monitoring data. For my example, I am going to say that I will collect monitoring and short-term outcome data. If you selected monitoring, you will be asked how you will monitor. For example, I might use the number of self-completed questionnaires young drivers returned after the workshop. If you said you would measure short-term outcomes, you will now be asked what kinds of outcomes you want to measure, for example, knowledge, behaviour and attitudes, and to provide further details on this. I will say that I would like to measure knowledge. In the details box, I will say that young drivers are more likely to implement some of the advice if they become aware of the dangers of driving on rural roads. I will also say that I will not ask the young drivers about their future behaviour, because they might feel they cannot say that they don't want to take on any of the advice that they heard about in the presentation. In this question you will be asked how much change you would like to see. For example, I would like to see young drivers' knowledge of the dangers associated with travelling on rural roads and their awareness of what they can do to keep themselves safe when travelling as a driver or passenger on rural roads increase by 20%. If you selected long-term outcomes as one of your measures, the same questions asked about short-term outcomes will be repeated for long-term outcomes. You can now submit your responses using the green Submit button and move on to the next section of the questionnaire that you would like to complete, or submit the entire questionnaire and select your evaluation design and method. If you have any questions about using the toolkit, please contact us by using the details on screen.